Good morning, everybody.
Good morning and welcome.
Welcome to people at the Hub and welcome to everyone watching online. It's so great to have you here.
We're going to sing a song.
We are. Why don't you stand and sing? We're going to sing Reckless Love.
And if you can't stand, you can sit. Of course. Still I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind. Never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down flights till I'm found. Leaves a 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love. Shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't tear down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. No shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. No wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down flights till I'm found. Leaves a 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, haven't sung Run to the Father for a while, we're going to do that. I've carried a burden for too long on my own. I wasn't created to bear it alone. I hear your invitation to let it all go. I see it now, I'm laying it down, and I know that I need you. I run to the Father, fall into grace, done with the hiding, reason away. My soul needs a surgeon, my heart needs a friend, so I run to the Father again. Saw my condition, had a plan from the start. Your Son for redemption, price for my heart. I don't have a context for that kind of love. Don't understand, can't comprehend. All I know is I need you. Run to the Father, fall into grace, done with the hiding, reason away. The soul needs a surgeon, the soul needs a friend, so I run to the Father again and again and again and again. Whoa, whoa. For my first breath, running into your arms is running to life from death. I feel this rush deep in my chest. Your mercy is calling out, just as I am. You pull me in, and I know I need. Father, fall into grace, done with the hiding, reason away. My heart found a surgeon, my soul found a friend, so I run to the Father again and again and again and again. Whoa, whoa. For my first breath, running into your arms is running to life from death. I feel this rush deep in my chest. Your mercy is calling out, just as I am. You pull me in, and I know I need. Run to the Father, fall into grace, done with the hiding, reason away. My heart found a surgeon, soul found a friend, so I run to the Father again and again and again and again. Oh, oh, oh. Oh.
New Old.
New Old.
Songs that was written about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And just rediscovered it. It's a beautiful song all about the cross. So please join in if you know it. If you don't, the chorus especially is pretty easy to pick up. Man of sorrow, Lamb of God, by his own betrayed, the sin of man and wrath of God has been on Jesus laid. Silent as he stood accused, beaten, mocked, and scorned, bowing to the Father's will, he took a crown of thorns. Oh, the rugged cross, my salvation, and where your love poured out over me. Now my soul cries out, hallelujah, praise and honor unto thee. And send from heaven God's earth Son to purchase and redeem and reconcile the very ones who nailed him to that tree. And oh, that rugged cross, my salvation, and where your love poured out over me. And now my soul cries out, hallelujah, praise and honor unto thee. Now my debt is paid, it is paid in full by the precious blood that my Jesus spilled. Now the curse of sin has no hold on me, and when the sun sets free, free indeed. Now my debt is paid, it is paid in full by the precious blood that my Jesus spilled. And then the curse of sin has no hold on me, and the sun
your love poured out over me. Now my soul cries out, hallelujah. Praise and honor
unto thee.
praise and honor
to thee.
praise and honor unto thee.
You can all just take a seat. Welcome to everybody who wasn't here in our first welcome. Lovely to see you all. And for those online that have joined us recently, welcome to you too. It's a bit echoey. I'll just hold it a bit away. Next Saturday, Pam has got a very exciting craft day where she's doing... Pam, do you want to come and quickly... Just give us a very quick...
I'm not
summary.
prepared for this, but
That's
I'm
all right.
sure I can
Just-
wing it. Yes, silk paper making. I don't know if anyone's actually heard of it, but it's not truly a paper. We use silk fibres, bond them together and turn them into amazing things like butterflies, bowls. We wrap rocks, vases. So the silk fibre itself is beautiful and we make it more so. That's the 20th. There are 2 sessions, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. You're welcome to one or both. It's a $10 charge which covers materials. You don't need to bring anything but yourself. If you'd like to stay for lunch and do the second session, very welcome. Thanks. Coral.
Thanks, Pam. It's going to be a good day. Also, just get ready, next term we're going to start GTM groups and home groups. So we'd love for as many as are able to join us in those groups. There'll be quite a variety in the groups. So just tell us if you're interested. That would be excellent. And on Saturday the 27th, we have an Australian Network Prayer Day. We had one about 18 months ago and it was fantastic. It was inspiring, challenging. It was a really good day. So that's Saturday the 27th from 8:45 till 4 p.m. So just one day this time. So let us know after the service if you'd like to join in. And here's Lex.
Well done, thanks. So good to be here. I've been flogging around New South Wales and Victoria last 3 days and went to a mate's funeral at Moama on Thursday, which was hard, and just really good to be back here with you all this morning. So it's funny how much stuff we can jam into a week, and all of us have a story, don't we? And I think that parents can be very cruel. My mum, before she got married, her surname was Alexander, and there were no boys in the family to carry this surname on. So I was the first grandkid. I got deputised with this mantle, and so Lex is short for Alexander. And I've never liked the name. Like when you go to high school, what rhymes with Lex? I got Rex. It does. But I got all through school. I got Sexy Lexi. Now I know you can understand why. I get that, right? But it was just one of those names that I'd like. If I could have been called Jeff or Ken. Well, you're a fussy. You don't like Jeff. Would you like? You can be Lex and I'll be Jeff. How's that sound? No, that's worse. Right. So, okay, you don't like your own. As I said, we get stuck with these names, right? And I always felt my name was like a handicap. And then growing up, my mate Laurie Pearce, he was tall, and I was little shorty Raymond. And then Rod Pearce, he was, and I just wanted to be tall. And I'm not, right? And so I felt like I'm growing up with this handicap. And then we started working with youth since I was in my early 20s, and I discovered something. When you're short, teenagers are not intimidated by your height. But I've found youth pastors that are really tall, and year 7 kids just can't, they're intimidated by their height. I was never intimidating. Like the year 12 kids would just like to lean down onto me and like, Joel, you're there on the camera, right? But you love being taller than me, don't you? It makes you feel good. Sam makes you feel good, right? And so I discovered my shortness was a gift. And then I got this name Lex. Well, the only Lex I ever knew in Bairnsdale was Lex Bush, who lived right beside us on our farm out hillside. And so I'm the only Lex. And so on all the posters we put up around the high school when we were doing these big lunchtime programs, it was just Lex and my phone number. Everyone knew it was Lex. I mean, if I'd put Mark, they'd get confused because there's Marks everywhere, right? And so I discovered that what I thought was a handicap was actually a help in life. Now, why have I told you that? Well, this is my Bible, and it's a fat book. And the reason it's a fat book is because it's a book of stories. It's not a book of rules. And in these stories is your story, is my story. And this morning we're going to have a look at a bloke called Ehud, which is worse than Lex. Like, Felicity, would you like to be called Ehud? No, it's a shocking name, right? And so, but we're going to discover something about us this morning in his story. But before I get to Ehud, if you're sitting here thinking, well, I'm not short, I'm pretty tall, I've got a good name, and you're feeling really good about yourself, I just want to offend you. Just for a moment, right? So I'm going to read something that Paul says to us, and it's in 1 Corinthians, and it's chapter 1, this is the Message Bible, and it says, "Take a good look, friends, at who you were when you got called into this life. I don't see many of the brightest and the best among you, not many influential, not many from high society and families. Isn't it obvious that God deliberately chose men and women that our culture overlooks, exploits and abuses? He chooses nobodies to expose the hollow, anyway, it says something, of somebody's. I can't read my writing. Pretensions, thank you, Kath, yep. That makes it quite clear that none of you can get by with blowing your own horn before God. Everything we have, right thinking, right living, and a clean slate, a fresh start, comes from God by way of Jesus. That's why we have this saying, if you're going to blow a horn, blow a trumpet for God. I always thought that humility was overrated, but I've discovered that Paul is making it clear that the hero of our stories is God. It's not Lex. It's not you. We get to play a part, but we're not actually the hero of our own stories. And Ehud was born 3,000 years ago, and he was born about 40 years after Israel enters the Promised Land. So they've been floating around in the desert for 40, they ended up in this Promised Land. And this is 65 years after they entered the Promised Land. Now, Ehud grew up with a deformity. He was handicapped. And he had the same handicap my daughter Mandy has, the same problem. The same problem my granddaughter Brooklyn has. And some of you were born with this same handicap. And if I asked some of you to come out here and take this pair of right-handed scissors and cut out a shape out of a bit of a paper, you'd struggle because you're deformed. You're left-handed. Who in here is left-handed? That's a lot of people. Wow. So this is a story about Ehud, and in the Hebrew language, there is no word for left-handed. And so when the writer of Judges is telling us this story, that he introduces us to Ehud right from the beginning as having deformity, and instead of saying he's left-handed, he says he could not use his right hand. There's no word for it. So he may have had a hand that was damaged, but he may have just been born like some of you and left-handed. Now, even like 50 years ago in Australia, school teachers would take out a little, stick and hit you. Bill nodding here, right? John, you might, growing up left-handed, they would hit your hands if you used your left hand to write with. Trying to get you back. So even in Australian culture, you were seen as deformed. Now, with this story of Ehud, it gets worse because it comes from the tribe of Benjamin. The tribe of Benjamin, the word Benjamin means son of my right hand. And he's left-handed, right? All his whole tribe, their strongest, most powerful identity was being in right-handed. The son of my right, he's left-handed. And so we get introduced to him finding out his greatest weakness, and he couldn't hide it. You know when you want to just fit in to all those around you, you don't want to be different? He was born different. And he couldn't hide it. He was known, and he couldn't hide his dysfunction. But some of you are brilliant at hiding your dysfunction. It's what you've done your whole life. You've hidden the brokenness. You've hidden the stuff away that if others knew what you were like, you think, well, they would see that I'm not the same as everyone else, that I have this struggle. And the problem is that when we have these hidden areas that we know there's something just not right within us, we limp through life. And yet in James teaches us that our secrets make us sick. There's a place where being vulnerable and honest, like last week when Denise stood up here and she's shaking and there's emotion in her voice, and she said about how she grew up hating what she looked like. She was repulsed by what she saw in the mirror, yet God took her on a journey of healing and restoration. And Denise, I just want to honour you, because when you stood here last week, so vulnerable, so real, that's inspiring. It's encouraging because God took you past that. And Ehud, everyone knew his brokenness, but some of us limp through life trying to protect from anyone ever seeing our dysfunction. And before that we sort of really get to know Ehud, the writer of Judges gives us the backstory. And he tells us that for the last 18 years, Israel has been occupied by this foreign power. Now, some of you may not have enjoyed the last 12 months of the Victorian government's way of handling things, right? You might not enjoy the way any government does anything. But this occupation was just overwhelmingly harsh. They didn't normally pay taxes. Now they've got to pay taxes. And so in Judges, it gets to verse 15 of chapter 3, and the writer says this: when the children of Israel cried out to the Lord raised up a deliverer for them. In the story, that's meant to be the flashing lights. That's meant to be when all the bells and whistles goes off. That's meant to be like skyworks at midnight, because that's making the story all around God. God being the hero. He's the centre, he's the beginning, he's the end of the story. And when it says, and the Lord raised up for them a deliverer. But here's the problem. When you hear the words, and they cried out to the Lord, you think that they're praying to God for help, but that's not what happened. That would be a very different Hebrew word if that was a story. It's just a cry of anguish. It's not saying to God, we're sorry, we've made a mess of things, we've turned our back on you, please, we want you back in our life. It is not that. It's just a cry, it's a shriek of pain. When we're driving sometimes, it only happens very, very occasionally, but Coral will get a fright from my driving. Her response is such an immediate shriek, a cry, a squeal, and then I've got a problem. Do I have to react to what she thinks she's reacting to, or do I handle the situation? Because her reaction doesn't help me. It doesn't. You have someone screaming in your face when you're trying to steer through whatever you're trying to do. And a thing I've noticed about, we've got a little 2-year-old granddaughter living with us. A thing I've noticed about grandkids or young kids, when they are running flat out and they fall over, if you don't hear a sound, and the breath's going in, and the breath's going in, there's no sound, then suddenly it all comes bellowing out, and the bigger the gap between when she falls and the sound, the greater the pain. 18 years, Israel has stayed silent. They've held their breath, and now they're crying out to God. It's just a shriek. It's a cry of pain. And God's response is to rescue them. He shouldn't have done that. That was not the deal he made with them. Only 65 years earlier, he made a deal, a covenant with Israel. He says, if you do this, I will do that. And he is breaking his own covenant. And the only way you can break a covenant is to take it to a higher level. And God takes it to a place of grace and not law. See, he made a covenant with one nation on earth, Israel, and it had a start and a finish. And when Jesus came, that was the end of that old covenant. And you can't apply old covenant on top of new covenant. You can't apply conditions because it takes it back into law. See, I've heard people quote this verse out of the old covenant and try and apply it onto Australia, apply it onto Australia today, onto people. And this is law. And it's out of Joel, and it says, if my people who are called by my name will honour themselves, will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I'll hear from heaven and I'll forgive their sins and I'll heal their land. But that's law. And that is not what God did in this situation. That's the old covenant. And you can't layer it over grace, because grace becomes law the moment you try to do that. See, grace is getting what you don't deserve. And if you try to water it down and put conditions on it, it just appears. It just goes back to law. Grace, God's grace teaches us that God loves us because of who God is, not because of who we are. So just going back to this story, the Lord raised up for them a deliverer. He chose an unproven, handicapped young guy, and that's the moment that he could have said, "No thanks. I'm not good enough. I'm damaged. I'm deformed. I've got stuff wrong with me. I'm not like everyone else. I'm not ready. No thanks, God. I don't want to do it." If he had done that, do you know God would have raised up another deliverer? Last month in Redgum was the highest giving financially we've ever had. We don't take up an offering. People give online. They can chuck money in the ammo box at the back there. But we've made a commitment to live stream this every week. And we don't do it for those in the room. We do it for you who are watching wherever you are, or watch it at some other stage. we've got this van we're setting up as a mobile recording studio. We've had to put 10,000 just into a new motor. And every week before the motor goes in, we truck this thing that you walk past out. It hasn't got a motor in it. We truck it in here. It costs $220 every week to bring it in. And it's people giving with a generosity that is making this happen. But you know what? If I don't know who gives. I honestly don't. I don't have a clue who gives what. But if you didn't give, God would still finance this somehow. If Ehud hadn't said yes, he's the one that misses out. See, what happens is that I know a lot of churches teach on tithing, but the problem with it, it's old covenant. It's you do this, God will do that. Whereas new covenant is give everything, right? It's upscaled. And tithing can be a good way to create a discipline in your life, but it's giving to get. And God wants to create generosity. And so those that give, that are supporting what we're doing, if that's coming from a heart of generosity, generosity is sowing. And what we sow, we reap. It comes back in. It allows God to do things that only God can do. And Ehud would have been the one that would have missed out if he had not said yes. There's been times in my life I've said no to God. And there's been times I've said yes. And I know which I would recommend afterwards, right? Because of what God has done in me, the benefits to me personally when I've said yes. Now, Ehud comes up with a plan. I love this story. This is one of my favourite stories in the Bible. It's really gory and gutsy, and you're going to love it, right? So he comes up with a plan. Israel have had all their weapons taken from them. The government's brought in new rules. You can't shoot rabbits with anything. And so he's had to make a little weapon of his own, right? Double-edged sword, little. He's left-handed, so he can hide it on the opposite side of his body to how they would have searched him. Because what happens is he comes to meet the king, and his plan is, I'm going to kill the sucker. I'm going to take him out. He's a problem. I'm going to take him down. And the plan was that Ehud would come with a heap of other guys, and they'd bring the taxes from Israel to give to the king. And when the moment was right, he'd get him with this hidden thing that... Because I don't know whether they searched him, but somehow the people that are protecting the king worked out that Ehud was not a threat. Whether it's left-handedness, whether they searched him, I don't know. So this is the big moment. Ehud's going to do this amazing thing. God's put this on his heart to do. And you know what happens? Nothing. It fails. It completely fails. Ehud was ready for God to use him, and he left there. I don't know what happened. The circumstances weren't right. It was too risky. He couldn't get close enough to the king. But he walks away and he's a failure. It just never worked. And I don't know in life if you've ever put your hand up to God and says, God, use me. I want you to use me. And you think he's going to, and it doesn't go how you thought. And you walk away and you think, I don't know. I thought I heard from God, but it must be my brokenness. I must be too broken. God can't use me. And so in the story in Judges, it gets to a place where Ehud sends the other guys away, and he starts walking. And that's where the story could have finished. But it's not where the story finishes. It says that, I have to put these things on. He sent the other men away, and then it says, at the idols near Gilgal, he himself turned back, and he had this message for the king. I've got this secret message, O king. He turned back, not at Gilgal, but at the stone idols. And every detail of the story is so significant. It's so important. Gilgal was about 20 k's away from Jericho, which is where the king was. That's like half a day's walk. To go back and come up with plan B is another half a day, so it's probably the next day. And he's going back by himself this time with plan B, but he turns back at the stone idols. What idols? Why is that significant? Well, when he saw the idols, something happened inside of him. He got cranky somehow. He's walked away from what he thought God had for him, and he sees these stone idols, and he gets angry at what's happening in his nation. But see, people can get angry what's happening in the world, in Australia, in Victoria, but if you just get angry, you can just get bitter. But he didn't just get angry, he had hope. And do you know where the hope came from? At Gilgal, 65 years earlier, when Israel crossed the Jordan, they put up 12 stones to represent God's faithfulness. That God had got them across this impossible Jordan River was in flood on dry land, and it stood as a memorial, and it says so that everyone would know that the hand of the Lord is powerful. And he gets to Gilgal and he sees idols that are to worship Baal. And I don't know if you understand what that means, but when we come to church and we worship God, we sing a few songs and we have a chat about God and we all go home. To worship Baal, Baal had a girlfriend. And if they weren't having sex, then there was no fertility in the land. So they set up in the temples, temple prostitutes, so that when you came to worship Baal, it was prostitution going on so that Baal would get the idea and do his side of stuff. And this perversion just got to Ehud, and he goes, no, someone's got to do something. I'm going to have another go at this. And the hope that he got was the reminder that at Gilgal, there were the 10 stones showing God's faithfulness. So he turns round and he goes back. And he's going back in God's strength and not his own failures. And I want to just read the next little bit of the story. So he goes back with this message for the king, and he enters the area, and they don't see him as a threat. And the king says, quiet, and all his attendants left him. Then he had approached him while he was sitting alone in the upper room of his summer palace, and he said, I've got a message from God for you. And as the king rose, like, the guy's morbidly obese. I don't know if I've had trouble getting out of a chair, so I've eaten too much. And you sort of push yourself up. Well, he's pushing himself up with his hands down here. And says, as the king rose from his seat, he had reached with his left hand, drew the sword from his right thigh and plunged it into the king's belly. Even the handle sank in after the blade. Now, in my NIV, they've tried to sanitise this. It's interesting, the NIV they have today doesn't have this, but in my NIV, it says, and even the handle sank in after the blade, it came out his back. In the new NIV, it says that his bowels discharged. In the King James, it says the dirt came out. Another one says the dung came out. This is a really important detail, right? Every detail in the story is really important. Years ago, when I was a youth pastor at Bairnsdale AOG, a friend of mine brought a male cat in that needed a certain operation. And Coral's waving at the back saying, don't tell the story. Sorry, Coral, I'm into it now. I've got to keep going. I'll keep it really narrow, sanitised, right? So this friend is holding the tomcat and I'm helping with the process of whatever we're doing. And the tomcat got a bit scared and it got out of its owner's hands, bit them, and then went under Barry Clark's office table in the main church senior pastor's office. Carpet floor. And the cat got very scared and it did a very smelly whoopsie on the floor, which we had to clean up. And the fumes, just the smell of this cat just went everywhere. And the reason this is so important in the story is because watch what happens next. Then Ehud went out of the porch and he shut the doors, he locked everything behind him, he got out of the place, right? And after he'd gone, the servants came and found the doors of the upper room locked, and they said he must be relieving himself. Why did they think that? Because they could smell it. This is a really important detail, because Ehud got away. It actually says the people that are meant to be looking after things, they kept waiting. They're going, I can still smell him. He's still going for it, right? And they're waiting. It says to the point of embarrassment. And eventually they go, something's got to be wrong. And they unlock the place and they find him dead. He got away because the smell gave the people the wrong idea. And every detail in God's word is so important. I want us to fall in love with God's word in the stories and what we can find in them. And the best bit about this story is that when Ehud gets away, he gets up in the mountains and he sends a text message out to all the tradies, all the farmers, all the sons, all the fathers, the business owners, and he says, this is what's happened. God has given your enemy into your hands, and they all rose up. These were untrained soldiers who were unarmed and had all the weapons taken from them, and they defeated 10,000 armed Moabite professional soldiers. How could they do that? Why did they rise up? Well, I think they thought to themselves, if someone like Ehud, who was disfigured, who was deformed, who wasn't a strong right-handed man, if he can be used by God to take out the most powerful man in the nation that's occupied us, then God can use us, because God's in this. If God can use him, God could use me. And I think that's why it worked. Because Ehud couldn't defeat 10,000 soldiers, it took a team. And when I walked in here this morning, I was so proud of the team that is setting up, that's getting everything ready. Like, they're doing this to serve you. They're doing it to serve those that are watching online. All of this is done for you guys, and it takes a team. And do you know what happened? For the next 80 years, there was peace in that nation. What he had put into motion went beyond his lifetime. And I think in life it's more important what we put into motion than what we even achieve ourselves, because it goes into the next generation. And that was what happened with Ehud. And I don't know the battles that you carry, the handicaps that you feel, the things that you think would mean that God couldn't use you. I don't know what opportunities you've had and it just hasn't worked. You've let God down, you've let yourself down. But I'm telling you, God's a chance, the God of second and third and fourth choices. And he's not so fussy who he uses, right? I'm a recycled failure. And so is Ehud. And so are you. I wanted to finish with a story. I wanted to finish with a story of a Christian and how God used them. And I was thinking I could maybe grab a story of some like athlete that had had a handicap and then they'd won the Olympics or something, right? But I went to sleep the other night thinking, I want a story about a Christian that God used, and I didn't have one. And about 4 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and I had this thought. I wonder who invented the process of Braille for blind people. I wonder who invented that. I wonder if they were a Christian. I wonder if they were a blind person. So I started Googling Braille. And I didn't know that there's 36 million people in the world that are blind. There's another nearly over 200 million that are visually impaired. And I didn't know that in 1809, a little boy called Louis was born in France. And when he was 3 years old, he was playing with a tool that his dad used to carve leather with, and he poked himself in the eye. And that eye got infected, and then it spread to the other eye. And as he got a little bit older, he would say this to his mum, "Mum, why is everything getting so dark? Mum, why is it so dark? Why is it..." By the time he was 5, he was completely blind. When he was 10, he was taken to the Royal Blind Institute. He won a scholarship to go to the Royal Blind in Paris. And when he was 15, he came up with the Braille system that is used throughout the whole world today that hasn't been changed in 200 years. At 15 years of age, he came up with that. And this 15-year-old kid passionately loved God. He died at 43 years of age from tuberculosis. A short life. What he created with this Braille system was so simple, and anyone could do it. But it wasn't adopted officially till 2 years after his death. He played the organ in churches all over France. He served in 2 main churches. And just before he died, he said, "I have seen the glory of heaven. There's nothing on this earth that can compare." And if you went to France, into the little village where he grew up in the little house that he lived in, there's a plaque that says, "He opened the door of knowledge to those that could not see." God raised up a deliverer for blind people, thanks guys, through a little kid at 15 years of age that helped to set people free. He can use us. He can use the person sitting beside you. He can use you. And I don't know how you see yourself, but I'm telling you, God sees you very differently. He sees someone that if they'll just say yes, he can do anything. And just as we step into this year, I'm looking forward to seeing how some of you step into all God has for you, how you get honest with the brokenness that's inside and how God heals and how God uses you. Like Denise last week, to share that such encouragement was a journey for her. We've all got this story to tell, and I'm just thankful that we're going to do life together this year. So thanks, guys.
I'm going to sing Man of Sorrows again. You're welcome to stand or sit, whatever you Man of sorrow, slam on the
my salvation, and where your love poured out over me. Now my soul cries out, hallelujah, praise and honor unto thee. And send from heaven God's own Son to purchase and redeem and reconcile the very ones who nailed him to that tree. And oh, the rugged cross, my salvation, and where your love poured out and over me. And now my soul cries out, hallelujah, praise and honor unto thee. Now my debt is paid, it is paid in full by the precious blood that my Jesus spilled. Now the curse of sin has no hold on me, and the sun sets free, no is free indeed. Now my debt is paid, it is paid in full by the precious blood that my Jesus spilled. And the curse of sin has no hold on me, and the sun sets free, oh, is free indeed. Oh, the rugged cross, my salvation, and where your love poured out and over me. Now my soul cries out, hallelujah, praise and honor unto thee. And see, the stone is rolled away, behold the empty tomb. And hallelujah, God be praised, He's risen from the grave. And all the rugged cross, my salvation, and where your love poured out over me. Now my soul cries out, hallelujah, praise and honor unto thee. Praise and honor unto thee. Praise and honor unto thee.
I just leave you with this thought. The very tool that little Louis Braille stabbed himself in the eye with, the thing that caused his blindness, was the exact same tool he used when he was 15 years of age to punch holes in a bit of paper so that others could see. The thing that caused him to go blind was what he used to set others free. And the thing that has caused you the greatest pain and hurt in your life could be the very thing in God's hands that He sets others free. Have a great week. Stay for some morning tea. Eat, drink, be merry. COVID's nearly over. Whatever. I don't know. Yeah. See you next week.